I hadn't stepped foot on my ranch in 2 years. Not since my wife passed and grief swallowed every reason I had to come back. The gate had rusted shut from disuse, the wildflowers were taller than the fence posts, and my pickup kicked dust like a ghost returning home. But I still knew every inch of this land. Every bend in the trail, every stubborn patch of mesquite, and exactly where my barn sat behind the ridge. So imagine my confusion when I rolled up to find a stranger's SUV parked on the gravel, a plastic HOA sign bolted to my fence, and a woman in a pastel visor screaming into her phone. Yes, 911? There's a bearded man breaking into the neighborhood through the ranch gate. He's aggressive and possibly armed. She hadn't even asked who I was. That was her first mistake. Her second? She didn't know I built that road. I own this land, and I'm the judge who legally dismantled the very HOA she claimed to represent. I stepped out of my truck slowly, dust settling around my boots as I closed the door and walked toward the gate like I wasn't standing on private property, because I wasn't. I owned it. All 200 acres of it, same as I had for the last 25 years. But the sight before me was surreal. The fence had been freshly painted white. There was a keypad installed where my rusted lock used to be, and along the road I spotted solar lights, cheap ones but clearly bought in bulk. My family crest, which I'd carved into the wooden gate myself, had been removed and replaced with a cheesy HOA logo that looked like it was designed on clip art. And there she was, the woman, Karen, though I didn't know her name yet, pacing beside her car and glaring at me with the unearned fury of someone convinced they were always right. Her voice was loud, shrill, and laced with the assumption that her version of reality was the only one that mattered. "You are trespassing on HOA land," she snapped, holding her phone toward me like it was a badge. "I have called the police. I suggest you leave before you're arrested." I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I simply nodded and said, "Perfect. I'd love to talk to them too." That confused her. She paused, like she expected me to panic or climb back into my truck. But instead, I leaned on the fence and looked out over the hill. My hill. The same one my wife and I used to walk at sunset. The same one where we scattered her ashes. I knew this land like I knew my own heartbeat. And now it was decorated with signs that didn't belong here, rules I never agreed to, and a woman who had no idea the trap she'd just stepped into. When the sheriff's car rolled up 10 minutes later, I recognized the driver immediately. Deputy Cole, now Sergeant Cole, had testified in my courtroom years ago when I was still seated on the district bench. He was older now, grayer, but the moment he saw me, his entire posture changed. He stepped out of the cruiser and gave me a hesitant smile. "Judge Langston?" he asked, as if seeing a ghost. "Didn't expect to find you out here." Karen perked up. "That's him," she cried. "That's the man who broke into HOA property. Arrest him before he disappears." Cole blinked, then looked at me, then back at her. "Ma'am, did you say Judge Langston broke into your neighborhood?" Karen's mouth twitched. "He said his name is Harris or something. He's trespassing. We've had issues with squatters out here." Cole looked visibly uncomfortable. "Ma'am, Judge Langston owns this land. This ranch has been in his name since the late 90s. He presided over half this county's legal system for 25 years. Her face drained of color like a tipped glass of milk. "That's not possible," she muttered. "This is part of the Stone Ridge HOA now. We annexed it last year." I chuckled. "That's funny," I said, "because I'm the judge who struck down Stone Ridge's annexation charter for fraud and abuse of power. That HOA doesn't exist anymore. Legally, it's dust." Karen opened her mouth, then closed it. Then opened it again, this time louder. "That's a lie. We refiled. We have documents." She lunged for her car, yanked open a binder from the back seat, and started flipping through page protectors like a desperate student who forgot they were failing. Cole looked at me, brow furrowed. I gave him a small shrug. "Want to see the land charter?" I asked. "It's inside. Along with the court ruling I signed last year." Karen began sputtering. This is all fake. You can't just show up here and pretend to be a judge. Cole raised a hand to calm her. Ma'am, I've known Judge Langston for 15 years. If he says this land isn't under HOA control, I believe him. You might want to check your paperwork with the county before pushing this any further. She didn't take it well. He's scamming you, she screamed. He's manipulating the system. Do you know who I am? I tilted my head. Do you? She pointed a trembling finger at me. You're a liar. Then, to Cole, arrest him. Or I'll have your badge reviewed. Cole gave a long sigh, walked over to me, and quietly said, Judge, you want to press charges for trespassing? Because technically, if this is your land, she's the one illegally parked. I smiled. Not yet. But get your body cam on. I have a feeling this is just the beginning. Karen stood there, breathing like a steam engine, watching her version of reality crumble like brittle paper. She had no idea how badly she'd overplayed her hand. And I hadn't even opened my glove box yet, where the court orders, maps, and deed copies waited like loaded evidence. I could have ended it right then. But something told me this went deeper. Much deeper. So instead, I played along. Calm. Quiet. Observant. And I asked Karen one simple question. When exactly did this so-called HOA start managing my ranch? She stared at me like I'd insulted her dog. After the old HOA dissolved. We restarted it. Reorganized it under new leadership. I'm the president now. I nodded. Fascinating. And who gave you the authority to do that? The community did, she snapped. We voted. We made it official. We run things here now. That's when I knew she'd gone rogue. The Stone Ridge HOA had been terminated by judicial order. It was no longer a legal entity. There was no transition plan, no right to reorganize without county approval. And yet here she stood, so confident, so loud, so wrong. She thought she was managing a neighborhood. But what she was really doing was impersonating a dissolved authority. Possibly committing fraud. And charging people to live under rules that no longer existed. I didn't need a robe or a gavel anymore to see that this was going to end in court. But this time, I wasn't going to be behind the bench. I was going to be the one pressing charges. As I turned back toward the house, Karen stomped after me, still yelling into her phone, this time to someone named Brandon from legal. I wasn't worried. I'd written the judgment that destroyed their first HOA. And I was about to take down whatever shadow version she thought she'd built. Sergeant Cole stayed longer than I expected. He followed me up the gravel drive in his cruiser, while Karen stood fuming by her car, slamming her binder shut like that alone would erase the fact. I invited him inside, though the place still had the eerie quiet of a home that hadn't seen life in 2 years. The porch creaked under our boots, the screen door groaned open, and the scent of dry pine and forgotten mornings met us like a familiar old ghost. I hadn't cleaned a thing. I hadn't had the heart. But today was different. Today, the house didn't feel empty. It felt like a battleground retaken. Cole glanced around, clearly unsure what to say, until I gestured to a large metal lockbox sitting beneath the old bookshelf. It hadn't been touched. I unlocked it and pulled out 3 thick folders, one labeled Stone Ridge HOA Case 22-0174 in bold black ink. I handed it to him, and watched his eyebrows shoot up as he flipped through the pages. Wait a second, he murmured, stopping at one of the highlighted sections. This says, you ruled the HOA dissolved due to charter irregularities, improper annexation, misappropriated funds, and document forgery? I nodded. The HOA had illegally expanded beyond its originally permitted territory, including into agricultural and non-platted land. Mine was one of those parcels. They had no legal right to claim authority here, but they started doing it anyway. Cole whistled low. That's serious stuff. I had no idea it included this ranch. They didn't advertise it, I replied. The ruling came down quietly to avoid panic. They were ordered to disband, not reorganize under a new name. I handed him the second folder, This one filled with property deeds, land surveys, and the original county charter issued to my father in 1973. Every square foot of this land is mine. Always has been. Cole looked toward the window, where Karen's SUV was still parked. She really picked the wrong fight. She doesn't even know how wrong, I said, and pulled the third folder, photographs. This is from 2 months ago. A neighbor sent them to me anonymously. The photos showed people, Karen and several others, standing at my barn holding clipboards, tape measures, and boxes labeled HOA Welcome Packet. One showed them wheeling a table out of my horse stable. Another captured a freshly printed HOA sign being zip-tied to my back gate. They've been renting the place out as a community facility for months. Events, meetings, dues. Cole leaned back in the chair. So you're telling me Karen created a new HOA from the ashes of the one that was shut down, and started illegally charging people to use property she doesn't own? That's exactly what I'm telling you, I said. And I've got more. My neighbor said she's been charging residents lake access fees, again, to a lake she has no rights to. They even set up a digital payment account under the name Stone Ridge Preservation Committee. But there's no nonprofit registered under that name in the county. Cole scratched his head. Sounds like a textbook case of HOA resurrection fraud. And that's before we even talk about impersonating an officer of a dissolved legal entity. Not just impersonating, I added. Threatening, harassing, issuing fake fines. I've heard stories from folks being told they'd lose property access unless they signed new compliance agreements. Karen is running a racket. Cole stood up, visibly rattled. I need to get this to the DA. This might not be just a civil issue anymore. You're talking about criminal fraud, possibly wire fraud, mail fraud, and unauthorized use of land. I nodded. That's why I didn't lose my temper this morning. I wanted her to speak freely. You were wearing a body cam, right? Always, he said. And it caught everything. He paused, then looked at me more seriously. You want me to arrest her now? Not yet, I said. Let her talk more. Let her put it all in writing. She's convinced she's right. I want her to bury herself. Cole agreed to return to the station and start a file with everything I'd given him. As he drove away, I stepped outside to watch Karen still pacing on the gravel, now on her Bluetooth headset and flailing her arms. She didn't look afraid. She looked determined, like someone still convinced that the louder she got, the more the world would bend to her. I walked down the driveway and stood by my fence as she ended her call. You'll be hearing from our lawyers, she hissed. You won't get away with this. I look forward to reading their letter, I replied calmly. You might want to have them research Judge Langston versus Stone Ridge HOA first. Could save you some embarrassment. Her eyes narrowed. I've talked to the board. They all agree your deed is outdated. This area was rezoned and reassigned under community ordinance last year. You're just bitter you weren't included. You can't rezone private property without the owner's consent, I said. And the only ordinance in effect around here is state grazing law, which doesn't mention your name once. She turned and stomped back to her car. But instead of leaving, she opened her trunk and pulled out a stack of printed flyers. I watched as she stormed toward the mailboxes and began taping up bright red notices. I walked over and pulled one off. It read, "Attention! A trespasser has been identified attempting to illegally claim vacant HOA land. Do not engage. Report immediately to HOA Security." I laughed. Out loud. Vacant. I muttered. You think this is vacant? But she was already moving to the next pole. That's when I noticed something strange. A small black camera mounted underneath the mailbox cluster, pointing down my drive. I followed the wiring with my eyes and saw it led to a tiny box buried in a hedge nearby. I walked over, snapped a photo, and pried it loose. It was a basic motion-triggered camera, the kind used for wildlife or security. Someone had installed it to monitor comings and goings at my ranch. Someone who wasn't me. I brought the camera inside,